time opening. We have an eye, sort of a nostril, 2 teeth. One of the teeth has a small cavity. Close call, folks, but I think we got here just in time.
Presented by Maria Menounos and Kevin Undergaro. This is Anatomy of a Movie. In-depth discussions and breakdowns of various movie titles. And now that you've seen the movie, let the dissection begin.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Anatomy of a Movie. We have approximately an hour and a half to talk about a 2-hour, 10-minute movie called Need for Speed. So we will definitely be speeding. Cops, don't bother us.
Don't leave us alone.
I am your host,
run
Phil Svitek, joined alongside Demetri Panos.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Just the fearless two of us today. We figured driver/passenger only. No room for others.
My co-passenger is Jesus.
So we're gonna break this down in, from various factors. We'll talk about some of the video game aspects. We'll talk about obviously the script. We'll talk about some of the reception. We definitely have to talk about the reception. I mean, overall thoughts for you, Demetri, on this movie.
Overall thoughts. Listen, I gotta be honest. You know, we're here to appreciate movies and talk about technique and everything, but this movie made me angry. It just wasn't a good movie. I can appreciate the technique. I liked Scott Waugh's previous film called Act of Valor, but this one for a racing movie just didn't race. I was literally I was bored. You know, the cars were cool. I like Aaron Paul, and I think he has the makings to make that leap into the big screen. And but this Need for Speed was, you know, it was in lack of any speed whatsoever, and that 2-hour and 10 runtime was just unnecessary for this type of a movie. It seemed to have, you know, it's tough because it's hard not to compare this to the Fast and Furious, which have become so big. Especially of recent, and you know, they have played, Fast and Furious folks have played it smart. They changed the genre. It went from being racing cars in the streets to like caper films now, and they've made the action has been so much bigger and everything. And while at the same time, a Fast and Furious movie, you check your brain in at the door, you know, and a lot of the stuff, and you just go, no way. But you go along for the ride because it's just so fun and big. This movie didn't have that fun.
A quick difference, you know, for me, my general thoughts were, I'm torn between this movie because there's definitely great elements that I absolutely love, and there's elements that don't quite hit. And with this particular episode, I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to go into the science rather than just hate on everything. We'll go into science of what people are saying and why why it didn't hit, and you know, perhaps give some suggestion and things like that. Because ultimately, I mean, you know, again, our goal is to promote movies, and so while this movie is not getting the reception it deserves, at least in the U.S., and we'll talk about that specifically, but at the end of the day, I think it is worth seeing.
Well, you know, here's an interesting thing that I think is important to bring up, is that this movie, you know, if you're watching us, folks, we're assuming that you've watched the movie too, and you're either watching to commiserate because you either feel the same way, or, however, you may be in that category that Cinema Score. The Cinema Score survey, which this is a survey that goes out opening weekend, and they survey the people who come out of the theater, and they give it a grade. The studios use this grade because they can sometimes figure out whether or not the movie will have legs. The Cinema Score rating on this movie was a B+, which means generally that the audiences that went opening weekend, B+ isn't too bad, especially for this genre of movie. However, on the flip side of this, the Rotten Tomatoes rating was a 23%. That's a rotten. You know, but you know, you're looking at the audiences liked it. Obviously, B+ isn't bad. If it was B minus, then you're saying maybe, you know, they're not liking it that much. But B+ for this type of genre movie, audiences like it. So if you're watching us and you don't agree with, say, me, just let me know what you liked about it, what made it special for you. And we do have to talk about the video aspect of this game and the video game aspect, I should say. So lots to talk about. I
want to start with Fast and the Furious, though, because I think a lot of people perhaps did have that expectation and are holding it to that level. And the difference is, for me at least, you know, Aaron Paul is clearly the leader in this. To me. And he has a rival. And unlike in Fast and the Furious, the first one in particular, you know, they were part and parcel, right? You know, they were kind of working together, and yes, there was deception and whatnot. But eventually, the whole arc was that they became friends at the first one, and then from then on, the rest is history.
Right.
You know, and it really, and you hear Vin Diesel talk about it, like they really are a family. And with this, yes, there was a family, but again, it was Aaron Paul really leading the charge, not in that complete way like Fast and the Furious. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, to me, in terms of if you want to start with that comparison, that's, again, the different goals. The goal with this, you know, so might as well talk about its kind of inception, right? Obviously, it comes from the video games.
Right.
The video games, they don't have that much story. You know, they're not family-oriented story. No, you know what I mean? They're just race.
It's a race. Yeah, it's a race. Now, it's interesting because in doing my research, every single interview that was done with Scott Waugh and even Aaron Paul, Scott Waugh had said, you know, I'm familiar with the game. I've played it. You know, the one thing that's the common thread when bringing up the video game is, he goes, what I wanted to do was, in the video game, you level up in cars. He goes, so you don't get the Lamborghini right at the get-go. You have to work your way up to that car so that you are more familiar with the controls. You can drive it better later on down the line. He goes, and that's what I wanted to do here. He goes, I start him off in the Mustang, the classic Shelby Mustang, which that was, in my opinion, that was the best car in the movie. Like, I wished he was able to drive that through to the end, because that car was awesome. But then at the end, he drives one of those, I can't even pronounce it, the Koenig or the whatever.
It's valued at $4.6 million.
Yeah, that's well above my pay grade.
I'm just, even in that point, I like how they kind of kept the numbers in there. Yeah. You know, because the one that went over 230 miles an hour that they sold, that was for 2.7. So you kind of, I like, you know, very clearly there is an increase. There is an increase.
And the directors, Scott Waugh and the writers, they wanted to make a conscious effort to try to keep that element from the video game in the movie, where he progresses. He works his way up to that special car.
And there's been according to Wikipedia, there's 21 actual Need for Speed games, all dating back to 1994. Although there's like 3 sub ones, so if you want to count them, it's really 24.
Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, just one that came out in 2013, Need for Speed Rivals.
Now I play video games. I do not. You know, to categorize myself as a gamer would be an insult to gamers. The only racing game I've ever played, and to me it's my favorite, it's like, I've dabbled with a couple of others, but Burnout. I'm a big Burnout guy, which sort of kind of has a Need for Speed element, because the way that cars crash and everything. I like a good racing game. They're fun. They're easy. You don't have to manipulate the controls as much. But Need for Speed, I've never actually played. I'll be honest. But I do recognize the franchise as far as a video game. And every time a new Need for Speed comes out, like I hear about it because it's advertised. You know, whether it's on TV or in the gaming mags.
I remember living and traveling internationally. For kids growing up, Need for Speed was so synonymous, because, you know, there's a lot of video games with stories and things like that. For example, when Square Soft, you know, the Final Fantasy games and whatnot, those had a little bit too much story. This, again, like FIFA for soccer, this for racing, you know, it's just simpler and it's more universal.
Yeah.
And Need for Speed was always that, and you can kind of go to pretty much any country, and whether it was a PlayStation or Xbox or computer, you always were able to play somehow in some way.
Sure.
And it was always cool in that regard of like who's playing on what device.
Yeah, and the cool thing about a racing game is that a schmuck like me can pick up my controller and relatively easily try to get through it. Like you don't have to be simultaneously pressing buttons. You don't have to lock necessarily.
But they
this
had their
trigger
shifting.
accelerates. Yeah, but you don't.
That was the trickiest part of the video games was the shifting.
But again, like compared to a movie or to a game like a BioShock or a Mass Effect, which I'm playing Mass Effect 3, that goes to show you how much of a gamer I am. I'm playing a game that's like 50 years old. So, but you got it. There's an element there when for a racing game you push forward, you press this button, you accelerate this button, brakes, you can drift. Anybody, even if you're not an avid gamer, you can more or less
because you just
get better at it. Yeah, you just get it.
Okay, okay, so I start here and I gotta go to the finish line, and there's one. It's easy.
Yeah, it's easy, and they're fun. Like they chew up time. Graphics are great, and so I can recognize.
You can play with friends
True.
or alone.
Yep.
And again, to add people in, again, there's a quick learning curve.
Quick learning curve, and that's a great point. And graphics are great, so I understand the franchise for Need for Speed, and you can get its popularity. You understand that, and in a sense, I can understand trying to bring that to the big screen. Because listen, somebody was sitting around going, "Look what Fast and Furious is doing." This game, Need for Speed, this sort of kind of has that street racing element to it, except with instead of muscle cars, we're looking at these very limited edition, very $4 million cars, and we could have something here. So I understand, why a competing studio might want to try to build a franchise, since that's the way to go these days.
This was part of what I was slightly confused about. Brothers George and John Gatness had written the script, and they, I believe, shopped it around in 2012. But then in July 2012, it got bought by DreamWorks, and they were committed to making the movie.
Right.
That's how?
Yeah, and I guess Steven
they wrote
Spielberg.
It before. Yeah, he's attached to it. He actually cast. While we're talking about it, Steven Spielberg. Just to look, I know this is kind of getting ahead of ourselves in terms of casting, but many people, and we'll talk about the people considered, but and Aaron Paul particularly, Steven Spielberg was watching Breaking Bad, and he's like, I want that guy.
Yeah, I want that guy. Yeah, and he obviously sees something in Aaron Paul, and we can talk about him a little bit later, but we'll bring him up since you brought him up. I mean, I like Aaron Paul.
Yeah.
That there is something about Aaron Paul that there's a likability factor to this guy, and I can see him being in some more movies, whether they be action or whatnot, but there's a likability factor to him, and he wasn't one of the things that I disliked about this movie. I was happy to see him come from Breaking Bad, because he just seems like an all-around good guy. You want to like him when he's on screen.
He's got another big movie coming out this year. I forget. I think it's like a Ridley Scott movie, perhaps. I don't chew me out on this, but it might be like Exodus or something.
Yeah, we'll just look him up.
You do that.
We will
you
just
do
look
that,
up
because
what he's
otherwise
up
I'm going to
for.
sound like a blundering idiot. But going back to the script, so eventually bought out by DreamWorks Studios, and so then we mentioned Scott being the director of the movie. He did Act of Valor before, and you were mentioning before we started the show that a lot of the scenes, as things developed, were kind of based around the fact of what's this chase scene going to look like, and then let's figure out how to write it in.
Yes, and that, we were talking. That to me is like cardinal rule number one. You don't necessarily, you craft your action scenes within your movie. You don't map out your action scenes and then go to the writer and go, here, write this in.
Yeah.
It's that to me could be a fatal flaw of the movie. And listen, he was a stuntman, so he understands what it takes to put the action scenes like in this movie or even in an Act of Valor together. The cool thing, if you saw Act of Valor, it's actually a pretty cool movie that uses actual Navy SEALs, And if you saw that movie, one of the big selling points is that every single quote unquote stunt that was done in Act of Valor was like for real. That's why they used real Navy SEALs. Everything that they did, it wasn't fictionalized. Like they were actual operations. The gadgetry you see in them, the actions that they do are true actions, which is cool. He doesn't like to rely on CGI, and I can respect that. And you can sort of tell with these action sequences that he choreographs. You know, he did the same thing. You talked about, well, why don't you, we found the same article about filming one scene in particular. It was cool.
Let me start with a major thing and then kind of go into that. So, you know, yes, a lot of visual effects were not used in this movie to the point that the Koenigseggs, the car at the end, right? Again, valued at $4.6 million, and so in order to do this practically, they had to obviously have different body pieces of this car, and you know, with different bullet holes and different damage and whatnot, and just one car shell, as they call it, costs around $300,000.
Right.
That's first off, the original price of the car is insane, but then even $300,000 could get you an insane car.
Oh, it could get you a great car, and you have to note that $300,000 they knew inevitably was going to be wrecked.
Yeah,
like they were going to wreck the $300 shell that went over the cage. Yeah, so you know that they were going to wreck that, but. So what would you rather? What's more cost effective? Wreck the $300,000 or a $4.2 million car? So you know, I understand that.
I mean, I get that. And then so to Demetri's original point, the authenticity, right? So everyone from there took stunt driving lessons.
Yep.
I don't know from who. It could have been interesting if Scott actually taught them himself. Although I don't know if I doubt he would have the time, but I think he might have certainly visited.
He might have visited. He did say, he was asked in one of the interviews that I read with him, he was asked whether or not, like, does he miss it? Did he go and, like, do any of the stunts? And he's like, that's not my job anymore. He's like, I just didn't have time.
He couldn't. I mean, you know, teaching I could see him doing the actual stunts. I mean, God forbid you break, like, he breaks anything. Where's our director?
Yeah.
So you can't, you know, studio's not.
They're not going to bond him.
So in one particular, when Toby, Aaron Paul's character, returns the crashed car, he's supposed to skid to his mark, and Aaron was apparently so scared that he kept missing by 15 feet, which actually isn't that much, but
maybe from here to the camera that's pointed at me.
Yes,
maybe.
And so, but he wanted to have it be so real, and so he had him go. You know, he kept saying to Aaron, "Hit me." And so he was literally behind the camera, and then for Aaron's benefit, the only thing that Scott did was have a guy on his belt so the guy could pull him if Scott didn't want to voluntarily get out of the way.
Right.
But they eventually got it to 2 feet.
2 feet. And what's great about that shot too is that, and it is one of the cool aspects of the movie, he was able to get a close-up of Aaron Paul's face in the car. So that's not a CG of Aaron Paul's face over a stunt driver. It's actually Aaron Paul, and he was able to get that, and then we see him getting out of the car. So I understand his craft, and again, it worked to full effect in Act of Valor, and to an extent it worked here. I will say that there were a lot of scenes, would you agree, where they did show the actor's face in the car, driving at a high rate of speed. Like the camera would come around, and it actually, for me, it actually reminded me of, most recently, of Jack Reacher. Because I know when they filmed that movie, there was a great car chase in it. And again, he didn't want to rely to CG. And so Tom Cruise was actually driving that. I think that could have been a Mustang or a Charger. So you actually saw Tom Cruise behind the wheel of the car. In this movie, you get the sense that Aaron Paul's really driving this. I thought it was funny, and you may have read the same thing too, that what's her name? Poots. Imogene Poots?
Yeah.
Okay. There was a scene in which she was supposed to be driving the car, and they were going up this mountain, and like she doesn't even have her driver's license yet. And so Aaron Paul's like, yeah, it was really great. He goes, we had to switch seats in the car while we're driving around this canyon. It was just a wall and a drop. And yeah, she doesn't have her license. And I'm like, well, there you go. I hope they were bonded for that. But that was interesting. And the other scene, the helicopter scene.
Yeah.
Apparently, again, another scene that was not filmed with any CG. They actually hooked the car up and drove it off a cliff and had the helicopter fly it off. So I didn't know that as well until I did my research. And, even Aaron Paul himself said he's reading the script and says, how can they do this without CG? And lo and behold, he's like, oh, car's flying. So,
yeah. I mean, it's again, it amazes me because part of these real life effects, just so much of it is science and having really great people. And so, yes, it is possible, but a lot of science has to go into that to make sure that you can pull it off.
You can pull it off, and here's a testament to stunt people as well. I mean, they can do things with a car that, I have trouble driving on the 405 out here in LA. Okay. And what these people are able to pull off. And again, when you're not using CG work, some of those like donuts that they're doing and the spin outs and the flipping the car over. It brought me back to the Hal Needham days of Smokey and the Bandit, which there was a reference. Did you notice
There's so many references?
Yeah. Did you notice the Smokey and the Bandit Trans Am? So, back to the Hal Needham days, who was also a stuntman. That's what he used to do. He used to get these cars, and there was no CG back then. So I appreciate that homage to those movies and filming it in that way.
Well, to that point, kind of bringing it back to the script, for me, the first 20 minutes were really great.
Yes.
The reason why, because, you're talking about an homage to those movies. For me, that was kind of an homage to American Graffiti. And
when they were I saw that too. Totally.
And that's what kind of really hooked me in. And again, we were moving at a good pace, and some of the things at that point, perhaps a little bit cheesy, but I didn't mind them.
Neither
and
did
then
I.
For some reason, after those 20 minutes, when it became about the mission and kind of story became secondary, and you could tell. So from the writing perspective, that's for me where it started to go down.
Yeah, you and me both. I felt the same way, and again, it was 2 hours and 10 minutes, and I seem to have felt every single one of them. I thought it opened up well, but one thing that struck me was, so in the movie, we have the opening race, and then we're getting more into the story, and there's a good buddy,
Pete. Are you talking about Pete?
Pete, and there's another race with these very rare. They're illegal in the U.S. You can't even get them here. These very rare cars, and Petey buys it. And I'm like going, that took place, because I looked at my watch, that took place about the 45-minute to 50-minute mark in the movie. Because, watching the trailers, something happens. And I'm like going, that's way too long for the first major plot point that's going to drive this for me. Like, he should have been done in the first 20 minutes.
I mean, you're referencing as a plot point. There's in script writing, there's act breaks. Mm-hmm. To me, that wasn't act break. That was an inciting incident. An inciting incident is something that sets everything in motion. And typically, you say first 20 minutes. John will argue an inciting incident, because usually an act break by 30 should be happening minutes into the movie. An inciting incident can happen within the first minute or within the first 15. Right. So, to be getting an inciting incident at 45 minutes.
At 45 at the least.
And granted, as I say this, yes, there's movies out there that you guys, I'm sure, can name where that defies all that. But however, you have to have mastered the craft of screenwriting to such a level to be able to pull that off. Yeah. Where in this movie, it wasn't, if your goal isn't to tell a great story right off the bat, your goal is to, entertain people through these races. Stick to a convention, hit the beats when you're supposed to hit them.
Absolutely. And that I think too is why Fast and the Furious, especially recently, really works. They hit their beats. They make it it's constantly going.
Yeah.
They don't, when there is dialogue, they have the dialogue. It's basically the dialogue is to slow the pace down, get a little bit more story, and then they hit you again with something radically like crazy obscene that I'm not gonna believe, but I'm buying into it. Like two cars dragging a huge safe down the streets of Rio de Janeiro. Like, it's crazy. It defies all the laws of physics, but it looked great and it was filmed fantastically. I buy it. In this movie, it could have used more brevity and maybe some, just some condensing of that.
So let's talk about the cast. Really, really great cast overall. Obviously starting with Aaron Paul. I can't pronounce her name, but Miss Poots. There was so many other actresses that they were kind of eyeing, but she ultimately ended up getting it. And to me, it's funny because I was like, where do I know her from? And that awkward moment had just come out like a month ago, perhaps. I was like, oh yeah, she's in that as well.
Is it Imogen or Imogen Poots? Imogen?
Yes. Yeah, something like that. And you had Kid Cudi.
Okay.
The rabbit. You know what?
I believe you.
His real name, it's Scott.
Kid Cudi was
Scott
Mescudi.
Yeah.
Benny.
Which, again, they didn't quite advertise as much.
No.
At least not in the trailer. And I think just that in itself is fun. Like, oh, hey, you have this rapper in your movie. To me, I found that interesting. And then I was like, oh, that's yeah, I know him.
And he's been in a couple of movies too. He was in Fright Night, the reboot, The Bling Ring, which did okay, 30 minutes or less. So the guy's he's getting up there in the ranks as far as his filmography goes. I thought that character in certain we'll talk about it later.
Michael Keaton, he I found him interesting. I thought he did really well. It took me a while to kind of guess who he was. Or, when I saw him, I didn't recognize him. He reminded me of, remember Do the Right Thing, Samuel L. Jackson's character?
He was he was the narrator.
Yeah, but again, in that movie, it felt a little bit more organic. I don't know if their intention was to have, there's Easter eggs that we'll talk about, to Need for Speed, because they definitely were in there. But I feel like there's certain homages that they did. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but for me, that's an homage to him, and whereas in Do the Right Thing, it felt so much more organic.
Right.
This one,
it just seemed like a paycheck for Michael Keaton. Like, we're gonna get him in here. He was fine. I think you could have gotten anybody in there. I mean, I'm just happy for the fact that Michael Keaton is trying and looking to make this comeback. He was far better in RoboCop. That reboot, I think, than he was in this. But, I sort of miss Michael Keaton. I wish somebody put him in, let's get him back into a comedy. Michael Keaton's a funny guy. I mean, he really is. So, to start
and there was
seeing
evidence of that, but I didn't think we, for the story we're telling, I don't know if it fit.
No, I understood why that character was there. I don't know how he's able to bankroll all this. I didn't get the character, and he has this elaborate setup, but yet when people are watching this on their iPads, the cars are dashes and dots. I wasn't getting this, but his face was being Skyped all over the place, yet apparently the cops can't track him down. I don't know, but yeah.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. But it's good to see him. I guess what I'm getting at, it's good to see Michael Keaton back up on the big screen. I'd like to see more of him in maybe some meatier roles, maybe back to comedy, which, that's what his claim to fame was.
I mean, all in all, this was a great kind of ensemble of people. It really was, and that's why, when it started off as like an American Graffiti, you had Little Pete, you had his sister Nita, and there was some history there, but all in all, we didn't really get too much into that history because the way it was set up from a script perspective, she was supposed to be the love interest because they had that history, and then all of a sudden comes in Julia,
right?
And she's buying cars, and they have that connection, and then Anita's kind of forgotten until we need her to be back in the
right,
and so for me, it defied that convention, and I was a little taken aback. But again, it had the makings of all these great people. You could have
Yeah, and again, when you talk about Dakota Johnson as Anita, like that character, I mean, again, for me, it was a missed opportunity. Wouldn't it have been better, like in the movie, towards the end after the Mustang gets wrecked and Imogen Poots is put into the hospital and whatnot, and Aaron Paul calls her and says, "Meet me somewhere in San Francisco." And he goes, you should leave him. And she goes, "I already have." And she reaches in and she pulls out the ring,
yeah.
the rock. And, and you would think like the missed opportunity is at the end of the movie, Aaron Paul's character gives the ring to Dominic Cooper, Dino Brewster.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it have been better had Anita take your ring? You're a liar. You killed my brother. Because wasn't little Pete her
That
brother,
was her
right?
brother, yeah.
Yeah, you're the one responsible, and you lied, and it was a missed opportunity for me. Other than Aaron Paul,
I mean, you could have gone the other way, and I mean, I don't know. There was just with her, she was just slightly under, especially her being his sister.
Yeah,
and Aaron should have had so much guilt for her. The way they set up, again, there was that love interest, and all of a sudden it goes out the window forever. It's not like he returns to it.
Right. Well, she ends up with Dino Brewster, played by Dominic Cooper, and she marries him, or they're at the very least engaged. So
engaged to be engaged.
Engaged to be engaged, and you just never quite wonder why. Like she ends up with Dino.
I think so many stories are great. When I thought Dominic did great as Dino Brewster, but I wanted more of their interaction. I wanted to A, up the stakes, and B, also understand, okay, why do they hate each other so much? I mean, I get it. Little Pete is enough, but there's also that history before that.
It's funny. It's great you mentioned this because I read an article with Dominic Cooper. And he, in this one article, went so much more into his character than they ever explained in the movie. Now, apparently, if you look closely at the movie, Dino Brewster was never as good as Toby Marshall as a driver, but he aspired to be, but he was always the guy that was on the sidelines. Like, if you remember when, at the beginning of the movie, that night race.
Yeah.
Dino Brewster comes over and he's like, "Hey, do you mind if I?" Well, during the race, he goes, or before it starts, he goes, "Hey, do you mind if I watch?" And he seemed to be like a pit boss. Like he watches the race from the sidelines, but he never really, like he won some. I guess he got some big race, but he was never really credited because he knew that Toby Marshall was a better driver. And Dominic Cooper said, "He's a very sad character. And this is where I went from. And what he did to little Pete," he goes, "that's a horrible thing." And he goes, "What I tried to do is, I tried to emote in one way, shape, or form that I acknowledge that little Pete goes flying off the track, his car explodes, but then to him, it's about beating Toby, finishing the race." And
absolutely.
And it's a horrible act. And Dominic Cooper recognizes, and he goes, "I had to put that in there." But what I want people to understand is that before that, he's a sad character. He wants to be part of the group. He really does. But for some reason or another, he's separated from them. But he'd rather be one of the guys. But he was never had that opportunity to do so. And I was like going, God damn, if that was explained more in the movie, that lends more sympathy for your villain.
I get what you're saying, because everyone except for Toby absolutely hated him. And yes, you could say that it's just the money for Toby, but
right.
The best is when you could have two people who absolutely like each other now all of a sudden are rivals. Like in Rush, you had the two people. They didn't hate each other. They were just rivals, and they threw jabs at each other, but it only made them better. And they went to great lengths to hurt each other to try to win.
Right.
But again, they didn't hate each other.
Yeah,
and it's fine if they, in this case, it's fine if they did. But I think they could have started off not so good, became friends, became rivals. Terrible thing with little Pete, and then from then on, we're right. You broke our friendship. Now I hate you.
Absolutely. And to me, that would have been more development, a better way to write the characters. Like maybe they were good friends. Like to show that there was a mutual respect for one another. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up Rush, because we talked about Rush, and Rush was a great racing movie. I believe we all agreed on that. And it did better overseas than it did here. This movie did better overseas than it did over here thus far. And it's just interesting. Do people in the States not care about racing? Because I find it, you can't classify Fast and Furious now about racing movies. It's just an interesting thing. But I think Rush was just so much. I wish they had looked at Rush and said, you know what? I know this is a true story. Let's follow this framework. We know in this movie, because it's a video game movie, we need a villain in one way, shape, or form. And I think the way that you laid it out, man, I wish you were with the Gatness brothers saying, "Hey, guys."
I mean, but to that point, I do want to say this. Ultimately, because I've been in so many of these situations. Hey, the heavy lifting is the hardest part. The easier part, everyone thinks like they're the genius when they come in the room and say, "Hey, you should add this, this, and this, or change this." That's actually the easy part. When you have to sit there 8 hours a day and figure this stuff out, that's really the heavy lifting.
But let's talk.
So I don't want to be too, you know what I mean?
No, I understand, but I didn't take it that way. I said
audiences, I know they can take things in a negative way and be like, oh yeah,
all right,
but hard.
But let's look at what John Gatness has worked on. A movie he worked on, Coach Carter. He did Dreamer. He did do Real Steel, but he also did Flight, which is the Robert Zemeckis movie. Now, Flight is a well-written movie. It's a dark movie, but it's a well-written movie. And you go, how do you go from Flight and then Need for Speed? You know what I'm saying? His brother, when I looked him up, didn't have Need for Speed as his only writing credit. But John has, he has the chops. He understands. Now, I'm not saying that Real Steel... but again, when you do a movie like Flight, which is a heavy dramatic movie, and Robert Zemeckis is making this movie,
and Denzel's
acting in it, people took that script seriously. And listen, I enjoyed Flight. I'm not going to own it. It's not a movie that I need to rewatch. It's a heavy movie, but screenplay wise, I look at the guy and I say, hey, this guy knows his stuff. And so I do wish that maybe he did try to reel it in and condense things, So.
I mean, while we're talking about racing movies, it's right now such a weird time with movies. You have apparently a movie called Senna, which I hadn't seen. Fast and the Furious, obviously, we're mentioning that. Drive, Rush. But are we as a society just over cars? Does the mainstream America,
Here's the difference, and here's why I say, because you mentioned it. You mentioned aside from Rush, you mentioned Drive. Drive to me isn't a racing movie. Drive to me is about a car driver who's
and the
part
mafia.
of the mafia and heist and what he gets embroiled in. His car happens to be his supporting character. So and Ryan Gosling, who's great in that movie. It's a really solid movie. I also mentioned Jack Reacher. Jack Reacher, to me, has one of the best car chases that I've seen in a very long time, but it's not a car race movie. One of the inspirations for Waugh was Bullet, and they call it, one of the best car racing movies. It's not a car racing movie. Bullet, played by Steve McQueen, is a cop. He's a detective. It's a car chase scene in which many others after, that car chase in Bullet is amazing, and it set up for everybody to try to top. And then you had other movies like The French Connection, which had a very suspenseful, great car chase scene. And then, of course, you had the Hal Needham movies and such. But these are all like car chase movies. Maybe it's just racing movies. Like maybe if the Fast and Furious started today, other than in the late 90s or early 2000s, I don't know if it would have the same reception, because Fast and Furious started out as race movies.
But here's the thing. and that's the problem. You know, it's good movies are never about what they really are. You know, Fast and the Furious, ultimately, yes, it was about racing, but it was about brotherhood and, you know, survival in some sense and all these different things. So, you know, Need for Speed, if you really look at it, it's a racing movie about racing.
Yes. Yeah.
It doesn't really, it had hints at being something more, but we never fully developed it.
Yeah, I was thinking before coming here today this morning when I was thinking about Need for Speed, I did sort of compare it to the Cannonball Run. Because again, when you break it down, the reason why is the Cannonball Run, if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. It's a funny movie, but it's a cross-country race. It's a cross-country race. Hijinks ensue. It's great stuff. Burt Reynolds, Dom DeLuise, Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr., great stunt work. I believe it's Jackie Chan's first movie in the States, but it's a fun madcap movie. And it is about the race across country and such. And Need for Speed had this cross country kind of, we need to get from, where was it? Philadelphia to
East Coast to the West Coast.
We needed East Coast, West Coast within 42 hours, which if you want to sort of kind of manipulate that plot, it sounds a little bit like Smokey and the Bandit, who had to bootleg beer, and he had a certain amount of time to do it, to go from, I forget where he had to go from, but he had a certain amount of time. There was a time limit. And that, to me, maybe if they did, Need for Speed isn't comedic.
Look at Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
True.
You know,
road trip
road trip. Another movie about a road trip and timelines, but again, it's never what it really is about.
True.
You know, and this really was about just the race. We've mentioned Easter eggs, you know, or homages to other movies, but homages to the actual video game. So the big race, the climax, what we're really all about is Don Leon, which is a reference to 2011's Need for Speed: The Run. Right. A character of Cesar De Leon. He was like the big guy in that one. I didn't play the game, that particular one. But again, you know, that's what it's hinting at.
Right.
I like the opening sequence, and in there, sprinkled in are Mario and Luigi, which kind of, you know, you remember they're kind of racing Mario.
Right, Mario Kart.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that was part of Toby's kind of collection.
And it was one of the first, Super Mario Brothers was one of the first, if not the first, somebody can correct me on this, video game adaptations. I mean, you can't call Tron. No, Tron was a concept and movie which became a video game, which was a movie. But I think Super Mario Brothers was actually one of the first to be based off of an actual video game. So that's a nice Easter egg there.
The Ford Mustang dashboard is obviously very similar to how it would appear in the game.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, think about it. You know, as you were watching it, you know, from every time they showed his point of view, it was pretty much like a video gamer's point of view. Yeah,
but you know, you see, again, I said that Mustang was the coolest car in the movie. To me, anyways, one of the coolest aspects was there were no side view mirrors, and they were projected onto his windshield, on the inside windshield. So he had the speedometer sandwiched in between the right and left side view mirrors. And from what I understand, because I was talking to somebody regarding the speedometer thing, that technology exists. I can't vouch for the side view mirrors, but that was cool to me. Right? I mean, I thought that was awesome.
Absolutely. And, you know, you mentioned, you know, in the video game, you reach certain levels and you get better cars. And it's kind of like completing a checkpoint, right? Video games are all about completing a checkpoint. He literally Toby completes a checkpoint by going into the hotel, right? Because he has to, it's his checkpoint to check in at the hotel. Right. And not only that, the little window, right? It says like, hey, you have reached your checkpoint. And it literally looks like a screenshot from the game.
Oh, that's cool.
They peppered that in. And then, of course, we talked about this, but Call Me Maverick, you know, I mean, so many, there was speed reference.
Yep.
There was a Top Gun reference, and so many of these.
Bullet reference. I mean, they actually, the drive-in theater, Bullet was playing on the big screen.
And that's one of 4 in Georgia, I believe.
It's an actual drive-in movie theater.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's still in existence as of today, still running. And that makes me curious, being in the business I am. And I wonder if they've converted to digital. They must have if they're still in business today. So, but that's pretty cool.
It is. And then, one of the other cool parts, another homage was to Rebel Without a Cause. I mean, Pete, with his haircut, looked like James Dean. They didn't wear the same colors with the jackets, but the jackets were similar. The only difference being that for Toby, they made him obviously white for the good guy. And then Dino clearly black, as if we needed any differentiation. But again, I don't mind that.
Yeah, I mean, and plus with Aaron Paul, they did want to make him Steve McQueen-ish. Yeah. Which, no offense to Aaron Paul, I do think the kid has chops, and I'd like to see him. But he's, the great. I was watching The Great Escape last night, and you see Steve McQueen on screen, and oh man, that actor just oozed so much charisma. And when he's in Bullet, his steely blue eyes, but you understand the reference in him getting into and driving that Shelby, that souped-up Shelby. Yeah. So, hey, I wanted to read to you when we were talking about the director. Here's something that he had to say. What Lance and I do. Lance is the stunt coordinator. He's the stunt coordinator on the movie, and they work together, believe it or not, on I forget the Torque. Which is another racing movie. So what Lance and I do in our scripts, when I look at scripts and I read the action, almost all of the time I just throw it all out. I know how the sequence and what the characters are supposed to do from page to page, but in terms of how they're going to do it, I like to reverse engineer it. Lance and I will go to a location, find locations that are interesting and lend to possible ideas, and then him and I will just sit there and dream up crazy stunts. Now, the cool thing about this is that he and Lance, I think, they can do this together. Like, they can work out stunts that are real, and they can work it without saying, hey, we don't have to manipulate this on CG. Like, we know how the stunts are going to work, and we know if a car's going to have to turn. So I find that sort of cool. But then he goes, then we bring it back and have George and Sean write them in. And I'm like, well, you should be taking lead from your writer and then collaborate with your writer and say, hey, that's a great stunt, but, we can make it so it's more real. You understand? Like, it should be more organic, other than we're going to dream up the stunts because we're stuntmen and you're going to have to write it into the script because we think it's just way cool. So, I just find that the process is unorthodox. Would you agree?
It is. Sort of. There's various things. Sometimes unorthodox things work, right? I'm all for, there's an old saying, right? You'll laugh, I think, but when you bake ham, they always used to cut off the not the crust, but you know what I mean, the little ends, right? And so the little kid would ask the mom, "Why do you do that?" "Oh, that's just how my mom made it." So the kid goes to the grandmother, "Well, why did you do this?" "Oh, that's just how my mom made it." And eventually, as the kid asked the great grandmother, she's like, why do you do that?" "Oh, because back then when we had ovens and pans, they were too small, so we had to."
Right.
But again, because no one questions it. And so in filmmaking, there's new techniques and things like that, and I'm all for it. But sometimes some things work for a reason, other things don't always work.
Yeah.
I want to bring up Jason Statham, who's known in the again, not racing movies, but car
Transporter.
Absolutely. You'll laugh about this one, but remember Death Race?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's still which one? The Jason Statham or the Sylvester Stallone?
Jason Statham.
Jason Statham. Okay. Yes.
Only because that was a movie about racing to save this guy's life. He was in jail, and their whole thing was like they air races between these jailmates, and if they win, they get out of jail, but they have to win sequentially 9 times or whatever it is.
Right.
Impossible task, and people get killed, and it's entertainment and whatnot. But again, as outrageous as that movie was, and it was all about the racing, but it was really about this guy's redemption.
Yeah.
And I found that
Proving innocence, and yeah, absolutely.
you know, and so again, I find their symbology, as outrageous a movie as that was, hit
Yeah.
for what it wanted to do.
Well, let's take another movie that doesn't. Again, we'll take another granddaddy of another granddaddy of car movies, so to speak, is Mad Max: The Road Warrior. I mean, those movies heavily involve cars, and it is not necessarily, well, they're racing away from one another, or they're big chase movies. And again, it doesn't necessarily work if you don't have a character to really latch onto, like Mad Max. So, when you brought up American Graffiti, it's a good reference because in American Graffiti, one of the plots is a racing plot with John Milner.
Yeah.
And, Bob Falfa, played by Harrison Ford, is hunting him down. And Milner is at the point of his life where he's like, because everybody's just trying to knock me off, and I just don't, want to, might want to get away from it. I'm tired of always having to prove myself. And there's a big race scene at the end of that movie. But you care for John Milner.
They're going like 40 miles an hour,
yeah,
which is the funny part if you think back on it.
But, it was the 50s. They had these hot rods. And the thing about it is that you really cared for John Milner. Now, American Graffiti isn't all about the racing. I understand that. But if you just took that one plot out of the movie, in which it sort of kind of is about the racer who's trying to be knocked off, the villain, is trying to find him. They eventually hook up. They decide on a race. They do their drag race. And, but in the end, for me in American Graffiti, I loved that character of John Milner. Where in this movie, God, I just would have liked it to have been condensed a little and just make it more fun. Like, this should have been Spring's Fast and Furious kind of movie. And I wish it was. I was rooting for it. The trailers got me sucked into this. They did a good job marketing, because it looked like, I can see another Fast and Furious movie before the next Fast and Furious movie, and this could be fun.
Well, let's talk about the marketing aspect of it. So they spent so much money on this.
Yeah.
And the argument now is that they might have gone too wide. They had ads on the Super Bowl all the way to The Bachelor.
Sure.
Are the fans of Bachelor really going to see this movie?
No. But it's Disney. Let's break it down. We can figure it out, because the production budget on this movie was $66 million. Okay. For a movie that's not using CG, we talked about the price of the cars and the bodies that they put onto them, paying the actors. The stunt people got paid, handsomely, I'm sure. So $66 million for this kind of a movie, like, I'd be, wow, that's not bad, because it does appear to be on screen. The total budget, including P&A, is $105 million. Like, there's no way, the way I look at it, that this movie should be over $66 million all in. And 105, so that's an additional, help me out with my math, that's at least 40 million, right? That's a lot of money to put into prints and advertising for a movie. I mean, I'm not even entirely sure that even like a Hunger Games, like, working at Lionsgate, I know that they work mean and lean. I'm not entirely sure they're dumping $40+ million into prints and advertising. That's a lot of money for this movie. That's a big gamble, unless they were making it for the overseas market, which
they seem to be doing. I mean, the theory is, one of the reasons why we see less and less movies is because, we talk about prints and advertising all the time. If I make a movie for $1 million, I'm still gonna have to spend if I want it to be successful, around that money in prints and advertising, no matter what, You
don't have to spend that kind of money to do it.
Not 40, but
you don't, and the deal is too, with today's market, a lot of that, I would say more of that money was going into the advertising. I mean, with digital right now, the cost of making the hard drive is so far less than what it would be to make an actual film print. So you're saving some money over there. but it just is like 40 mil for a Need for Speed. That seems very excessive, especially when your production budget was 66. I don't know.
But ultimately, my point is that it's easier to spend more money on one movie, budgeting, advertising wise, than it is hey, here we have several $1 million movies. How do we market them to make our money back?
Well, they're not.
I'm not presenting it in the best way.
Yeah,
but
I understand what you're saying, and here's the thing, because you said it, the model is changing. Studios are now looking for, and this is, I think it's a sad commentary personally, and this is just for me. I'm not speaking for anybody, but I just think it's a sad commentary. The studios are looking for franchises. That's like the big word. The term franchise has become cliche. They're looking for the big budgeted movies that are going to make the money that they can make mini sequels for. So they are, in essence, they're squeezing out those smaller budgeted movies because those smaller budgeted movies are not necessarily what they're looking at to make franchises out of, where they'd rather take the gamble on the bigger movie if they know that they can make a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6. And sadly, the $1 million movies, they sort of kind of are going away.
But then here's the funny part about it to me is then you have the Oscars and the Golden Globes and all that, and you look at the roster of movies and you're like, wow, these are great movies. None of them are none of them are this,
and none of them are Transformers, and none of them are Harry Potter. When we look at 12 Years a Slave, when you look at a movie like An American Hustle, I'm even going to throw Gravity into that mix because those movies were originals. Yeah. And I say, yes, 12 Years a Slave was a book adaptation, but, they're non-franchisable movies. We know what happens. You're not going to shoot Sandra Bullock back up into space to make Gravity 2. American Hustle is not going to be a sequel to, and 12 Years a Slave back into
10 years
slavery.
Of freedom.
Yeah, 10 years. I mean, and when you break it down, I found this interesting. I've been working on this trailer for this convention coming up, CinemaCon, and it's basically, the trailer is called CinemaCon Goes Global, and it's the top, I believe, 25 global blockbusters. So this is around the world, and so they're clips of these movies that are that are part of this trailer. There was no American Hustle, there was no 12 Years a Slave, there was no like Blue Jasmine, there was none of those movies are considered. Gravity was in there, but that Gravity surprised a lot of people.
Yeah,
but that was the only one of the movies that there was no Dallas Buyers Club. There, none of the movies that I know, we talked about all of them, but to your point, it's, these are the big mainstream movies. And when DreamWorks or Touchstone goes to pick up a Need for Speed, they're hoping to get a franchise out of it. I'm not sure if that'll happen unless those foreign numbers really, really continue to pick up some more. So, and then it'll just be made for the foreign markets, and it'll be released here without as much fanfare.
Yeah.
So, I think digital has really changed the way our distribution patterns are going. My hope is that we don't forget about these middle movies, and that we do sort of kind of, this is why I was such a huge fan of Gravity. You can make commercial movies that are original, that don't rely on something before it to have happened, and you can make money off them, and you can make quality movies. The talent is out there, is what I'm saying. Writers, directors, they're there.
And I like, obviously Christopher Nolan's done a franchise movie, but Inception, what that did.
Absolutely.
That there's like Inception 2.
No, there's no Inception 2. Yeah, there's no. Yeah, and one of his first movies.
Memento? Or
Memento. Like, you're not making a franchise out of that. You're not making a franchise out of the one he did with Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, The Prestige.
Yeah. Although but commercially, for him, Inception was,
Oh yeah. And then he's coming out with Interstellar, later this year, which I can't wait for. You know, again, though, I will say that Christopher Nolan's a very smart filmmaker. He's, you know, I find him to be brilliant. When he and his brother sit down and write a script, you're pretty much bankable that it's good. You know, I also believe, you know, I may have said it before, I'm a huge James Cameron fan. And when you look at his movies, how many of them have been franchised? Terminator, Avatar, but Titanic, they're not. But that's 2 out of his entire True Lies. We've never got a sequel to True Lies, which they could have easily done. You know, Avatar, they're going to sequelize. Titanic, they're not going to sequelize. Aliens, you know, there are reasons why he did Aliens, but he didn't do it to continue making alien movies, which, you know, that was they got other people, Fox got other people to do that. But, you know, he, to me, too, is a very inventive genius writer, and what he puts on screen I will go to. Need for Speed should have been a great popcorn movie. Yeah. Like Nonstop was for us. Yeah. I should have gone in there, check my brain, and eat my popcorn and go, okay, that was awesome. Sadly, it didn't work.
I mean, here's an interesting trend we're seeing, especially in this year in particular. We're seeing a lot of first-time directors.
Yep.
With it's talking of Christopher Nolan, Wally, Pfister, Angelina Jolie.
Yeah,
coming out with a movie. Hard to believe. We're gonna be talking about it. But it just goes to show it's not necessarily whereas it used to be the old thing. The director is the auteur.
Mm-hmm.
In a studio system, that's not going to be the case. You know what I mean? He's going to see the vision through, but you can't blame Scott for, I don't know. Unless he was just a tyrant and was like, we're doing this and this is the bet. And
I don't think they would have given him that much control. You know, there was an article too, like EA Sports, who owns who owns this title. You know, at first they were very collaborative. And then when DreamWorks picked it up, then it more shifted to them. And then Scott and the writers, they collaborated more and more. But I'm not thinking that they're giving Scott Waugh final cut. And, you know, it's funny that you say that, too, because even Spielberg, he had trouble getting Lincoln distributed. You know, I mean, and he's Steven Spielberg. That's how times are changing. And you know, you're right. The auteur, you know, unless you're a Steven Spielberg or Christopher Nolan, James Cameron, even Peter Jackson, you know, and I think maybe with Gravity, Alfonso Cuarón, some of these people might be given more space to work in. But for the most part, if you're a first timer, you know, I don't know. It could be tough. It could be challenging.
Yeah. Speaking of budget, it was shot in Georgia, and I joke about that because there's so many tax incentives in Georgia right now. A lot of it was filmed there, and then some stuff in Detroit. So in terms of the shooting style, we talked about kind of the close-ups and things like that. Yeah. They were conscious of it, and when projected in 3D, it looks really great.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this about shooting style. I found this on comingsoon.net, and they did it behind the scenes. Man, oh man, Shavitz, the camera work and the cranes and the way the camera, they had the camera on different cars, following the cars, and the camera could swivel, and it was that to me. I was like, wow, I could watch making of this movie. And even Waugh, he said, at one point he even got on the skid of a helicopter to get the shot of the pilot. So this guy's outside a helicopter. I appreciate that filmmaking. I appreciate when you're doing that stuff.
What's great, we talked about this, I believe, on Nonstop in terms of the fighting sequence, right? It's so just fast, and sometimes you can't tell what's going on. But in that movie, we were able to tell because of the shooting style. Here, so many car chase movies, to me, I don't know what's going on. It's close up. This, foot on the pedal. Shifting gears, speedometer, eyes, cut to outside, then we're back, and I'm just like, okay, I don't even know where anybody is. But this one actually for as fast as it was, we were able to see what was going on.
Yeah,
and really be able to tell who's passing who. You know, we were in communication with the helicopter. Like, it was great.
Yeah, and I agree with you. You know, to pick out a good point, it wasn't over-edited at all. And it let the car we got great angles, I thought, in the car races. I thought we got some really good angles. And even some, like, when the cars flip. I will say the little Petey scene I thought was great. Because, again, the way that it was edited, you also got a sense of how fragile these cars are. You know, little Petey was just bumped and his car did this thing. And because of that, it appeared as if the wind just whoosh, lifted that car up in the air and, you know, flies overhead. And, you get a sense that that's how fragile, really. And, it was a great scene, the way that it was cut together in the explosion and the Aaron Paul.
And what I appreciate, too, is, you know, again, we're cutting to their faces, and we cut to faces a lot of times in other movies, but they look so calm, right? You know, not again, Fast and the Furious, but in those movies, I sometimes, you know, they're talking on via walkie-talkie. They might as well be texting. That's how calm they look at 200 miles an hour. These guys, you know, I appreciate the fact that they had, they were scared when Aaron Paul, you know, he turns and swirls, and his face is like, ah.
And I think that's because he's really driving.
Yeah.
Too. And you're right. There is a confidence in the Fast and the Furious movies when they're driving those muscle cars. But in this, when you're getting Aaron Paul and the director's telling him, you're too far out, you got to come in, and he's got to skid 2 feet to the director and the camera, I would be probably scared. I just took like 5 driving courses, man. You really want to trust me with this car to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's, it is a testament to this movie. You know, again, this is regardless of whether I like it, the technique, and I appreciate that Aaron Paul's really driving, and I appreciate that they're not photoshopping his face onto the stunt driver. You know, you can tell. I think that's real fear. And when you get somebody like Imogen Poots, who's never had a driver's license before, look on Aaron Paul's face is like, okay, I get it. It's, you know.
And, you know, even in Rush, we had hints of that. Like, you know, just because you're a great driver doesn't mean that, you know, driving at 230 miles an hour, you're not going to be like, wow, or I'm out of control. I'm so close.
Right.
That's part of the excitement, is that you're that close to the edge that any, you know, you're teetering. I could literally die, or I could stay in control. And the only way to do that is to surrender and give my absolute attention and look like I am about to crap myself.
Yeah, and I got that when he was just doing the test drive of the Mustang.
Yeah.
When he said, I can get it to 230 and above. And I'm like, no, you can't. Now, again, there was nothing that I read that said what actual speeds they were hitting. And maybe there were some stunt drivers there who were hitting 230. That seems like a very fast speed. But regardless, it did appear as if not Imogen Poots, as if Aaron Paul, even in the test track, was like, whoa, like trying to hold that car down.
It's just one thing, you know, I've gone 120, I don't know if I've ever gone 130, but that's usually on a very, very straight road.
Oh, yeah.
To be able to hit just even past 100 on those turns, you have to be really skilled.
Yeah. Talk about skill. Try doing 120 in a Pacer. No, but even at 120, I mean, I don't know what kind of car you're driving, but I'm willing to bet that puppy was shaking.
Yeah, you're shaking.
Right? I'm willing to bet.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
yeah. So, I mean, whatever speeds they were driving at, you know, I liked it. And again, I take nothing away necessarily from the actors. I just, I don't know. I wish we were a better movie. Now, we talked about editing. Now, this one editor, Paul Rebell, he did Thor. He's worked with Michael Bay. Mm-hmm. He did Battleship, so we know that he's worked with what's that director's name? I forget right now. Battleship. I
forget.
Public Enemy. Hancock.
I've put that movie out of my mind.
Peterberg. So he's worked with him. I mean, he knows. He's worked with Michael Mann. He edited Miami Vice, and he did Collateral. So you have a very experienced editor that could make a movie look like really good. He gets the shots that he wants. And so I think that's why in this movie, when it gets to racing, which is to me too far and few in between, but when they finally get to it, case in point, I was actually nervous. Like the race with Little Petey.
Yeah.
Like when they were going through the streets, that was so well cut together that I actually felt the speed. And I was like tense. I thought, wow, to me, that was the best race in the movie for me.
Because it had the most stakes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, in terms of the editing, I give them a lot of credit. The reason why, I would knock it for the running time, but ironically, I don't think it was the director or the editor. I think it was just the fact of, okay, we've put so much money into this. It has to be at least 2 hours. I honestly think that's what it is.
Do you really? I mean,
I could totally sit there and be like, guys, we spent all this money. Put it on the screen.
I would just say cut out all of the blah, 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 blah that happened and just kept the racing on the screen. Like condense it because, I mean, I don't know. I don't know where the pacing comes from, but, I mean, that makes as much sense. Like, I don't know. A movie like this shouldn't be 2 hours and 10 minutes. I mean,
I think an hour and 45.
Perfect.
Like Death Race. I think
right?
It was an hour and 45.
Nonstop. Even Speed isn't.
Speed is like an hour and a half.
Right. And, keep the races going. I think some of
here's the problem, right? Especially when you're going to say, hey, we have 42 hours to get from the East Coast to the West Coast.
Right.
It should feel
feel like I'm flying. Yeah. I should feel the need for speed.
Yeah.
For sure.
It shouldn't take 42 hours to get... So
right.
Time needs to condense in that way, and but again, I don't think it was them so much. I think it was literally, okay, we've sunk $60 million into this. We got to come out some way.
It could be, but then I'm thinking, as a distributor, as a studio,
yeah, shorter is better.
Guys, we need to, like, if I'm an executive or a studio head, and I'm like, guys, can we trim this? Let's try to get this under 2 hours because let's face it, it's Need for Speed.
But then there's something to Man of Steel, right? 2.5 hours, whatever it is. There's something to that amount of length. Like Christopher Nolan, I don't think he's done a movie less than 2 hours and 20 minutes in 10 years at this point.
Right.
But there's something to that grandeur of like, wow, so, a 2.5 hour movie of this.
Right.
But it has to still hold. I think. So
listen, I'm not disputing, and that's as good as an excuse of making this movie, 2 hours and 10 minutes. I mean, the pacing didn't falter in the race scenes. The pacing just faltered once that critical race scene where Little Petey buys it, and then everything in between. There just wasn't anything exciting going on, and
I commend them because it was pretty much two people in a car up until when they finally got to the checkpoint,
right?
and they're communicating via radio and all that. But
and again, I mean, whether it's okay,
I'm good.
Okay, it could be a reference to Smokey and the Bandit again, because in Smokey and the Bandit, you had Burt Reynolds and Sally Fields in here, and at first they didn't, they were at odds. And this has, you have Imogen Poots and him. Oh, and they even do. That's right, in Smokey and the Bandit, if memory serves, I haven't seen the movie in a while, but they do a switch. I think Sally Fields, even for a short time, they do a switch off in the car, much similar to what they do here. And the Smokey and the Bandit Trans Am was in the movie.
I think part of the problem for me, and this is no fault of the movie whatsoever, I just felt like when they were going off to do this, Toby was going to drive the entire time, and I just thought, wow. I can't stand to drive more than 4 hours straight. If I had to drive 42 hours straight, I would want to kill myself. So to me, that didn't seem like a short amount of time. It seemed like, what the hell am I going to do in the car for 42 hours?
Dude, I work for Technicolor. My office is in Ontario. I live in Culver City. For those who are outside of the California area, you're talking about a 60-mile car ride a day within Los Angeles traffic, in and out of Los Angeles traffic. I'm in the car for a total anywhere from 3.5 to 4 hours a day. So thank God for Sirius satellite radio and things like Howard Stern. Yeah, and I'm not driving with the companion. I'm not in the carpool lane. So you are right.
And again, no fault of the movies, but it was just like 42 hours. Jesus, that's a long time.
I felt like 42 hours. Hey, can we talk about the look of the movie?
Yeah,
for a minute,
absolutely.
because That's one thing. What were your thoughts about how the whole movie looked as a whole?
Again, I liked it. That it had great landscaping. You know, we were in the desert, we were in the cities, we were by the beach. So it looked great to me. And again, we talked about the visual aspect of, you know, he's good, so he's gonna wear white. He's bad, so he's so.
Yeah, well, this gentleman Shane Herbutt did he was the cinematographer on it, and I found that especially the night scenes, they were done. They were almost picturesque. Like, it was, especially San Francisco in nighttime. You know, you could tell that it appeared as if they were using a digital camera. I don't know what type, but they were very, like, the way that the lights glimmered. And, you know, they always hosed down the streets for that effect, and the way the light reflected off that. The look of the movie, for me, was fine as well. Like, when they were in Atlanta, the drive-in theater, I did get the sense of going back to the 50s, 60s, like, in a sense, you know? I mean, I thought that they did the movie did look good for what it was. The cars looked great.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, the cars are awesome.
Let's talk about the music, because anytime you know, especially when you talk about kind of sports games, which racing would fall under, you have the ability for such great fun music, and it hit so many kind of levels. And Marissa, if you wouldn't mind, go to iTunes and, you know, let's kind of roll, as we're talking about it, just roll down some of the songs, because there's such a variety to them. And I credit them a lot for, to me, the ending song, which we're going to end on, oddly enough, was one of the great, you know, when he's getting arrested, it just, the swelling and whatnot, but then you had the driving scenes, which were so intense. Let's if you can, Marissa, find more of a driving one. Just pick out random. What were your thoughts on the music? Again,
it was a gentleman by the name of Nathan First, and when I was looking him up, you know, he's done a lot of TV, but he's worked with Waugh before, An Act of Valor, Need for Speed. He's done some videos. You know, he's nobody that I'm overly familiar with, but the movie to me, the movie never overcompensated. Like, it never took away, look, in a movie like this, it's got to be the cars, right? And it never overshadowed that. And to your point, like, when the end came, again, the way I thought that it was filmed.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it added to that. And that's what music should do. It should add a layer or a swell at certain parts, but I didn't think it was overdone. It could have, like, you know, right now I'm thinking of, like, the big Fast and Furious scene, which is the helicopter taking the car off the cliff. There was nothing that overshadowed what that stunt was, but it was a good companion. It was a good bed to what the action that was going on screen. So it could have been a heck of a lot. It was fine for what it was. There was nothing that I can point at and say that was bad. It never got in the way of the movie for me.
Yeah, I mean, you know, out of the more recent soundtracks of the movies we've talked about, this one kind of stood out in a good way, you know, where I was able to take it in. It didn't hinder the movie in any sort of way. It didn't take, you know, as you're saying, it didn't take away from that. But, it, you know, I also was able to remember it, so I commend it for that.
Do you recall if there was music playing in the Little Petey race?
There was, I think, very slightly. They might have cut it out at portions, you know, to highlight when they went into slow-mo. But yeah, they used for that. I think they used more sound effects.
Yeah, because one of the things that the director said, again, his inspiration was Bullet, and that 18-minute car chase scene. And he said one of the aspects he loves about that is that there is no music at all. All it is, it's the sound of the cars revving up, driving, like growling, the shift of the gears, the skidding. And so I was just trying to pick a point in that movie where he may have paid an homage to that and not use any music. And my guess is it would have been a scene that had perhaps the Mustang. So maybe it was the opening race scene. I can't recall. But I just know that Waugh, in every interview I read, he always referred back to Bullet, car chase, no music, just using the sounds of the cars and of the scene. And again, you need a good editor for that too. you really do need to build suspense, and that's why I think that little Petey one, yes, the stakes, it had high stakes, but I think that from good editing, we've talked about this before, when you're able to stay on things a little bit longer, other than cut, you get a sense of the danger, you get a sense more of the speed, and hence that does elevate the stakes. So yeah, I thought it was put together okay. It was paced better.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, looks like we have reached our destination. We will be arresting Demetri Panos for illegal speeding. Anyway, thank you guys for joining us on this Anatomy of a Movie podcast and webcast. We appreciate it. One of the things that you guys can do in return is just rate and comment. A lot of a slew of ongoing emails and comments and ratings have been coming in that you guys love us. So, we really, really appreciate it. And hey, if there's someone in your life that loves movies as much as you do, just tell them about us.
Give them a gift card to Anatomy of a Movie.
It's the best gift card there is.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think Need for Speed is important because if you're one of those B+ audience members, let us know why you liked it. I mean, they're really, I really could have missed something in this movie. But just let us know if you're a B+er. Because to me, this wasn't a B+. This is more in the D- category. But if you are a B+ and you say, dude, you're out of your mind. Like, why didn't you like this, this, and this? I'm all open for the comments.
My date actually loved this movie.
Really?
So it was interesting.
I sadly saw it by myself, and that could have been why.
Hey, I didn't say I enjoyed it as much as her. But anyway, thank you guys for joining us. info@anatomyofamovie.com. Of course, the website, Anatomy of a Movie. We're free on iTunes. We're free on YouTube. And probably just depends if we are on all the podcast platforms. There's so many. But definitely check out anatomyofamovie.com. And follow us on Twitter @Movie Anatomy. We're getting better at tweeting. We're putting in some cool news out there for you guys to follow if you guys are movie fanatics. We've got Noah coming up. We've got Divergent. We've got
Captain America.
Yep. Veronica Mars coming up. We've got a whole slew of movies. The schedule is up on anatomyofamovie.com of what we're doing. Obviously subject to change, but hey, we tried the best we can for you guys. And until next time.
No speeding. Cheers.
See you. Need for Speed 2.
Okay.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.